With an oversaturation of massive multiplayer online games, and gaming companies focusing more on how to produce more revenue instead of quality content, I'm here to answer one simple question, with a not so simple answer. Should you play The Lord of the Rings Online? Before we can talk about it, we need to acknowledge that MMORPGs can be broadly categorized as games released before World of Warcraft and games released after. The first MMORPG to really establish what the genre would come to be was Ultima Online. Released in 1997, the term MMORPG was actually coined by its creator, Richard Garriott. Ultima Online was a landmark game in the genre, not because of its gameplay, but because for the first time, communities and like-minded people began to band together and socialize, not only in-game, but in other social settings as well. Ultima Online created a second world for people to live in and enjoy with others. There were no quests as we understand them, no parties or dedicated PvP maps. Ultima offered a digital world to explore, enjoy, and meet new people. It wasn't until the release of EverQuest in 1999 that MMORPGs saw true commercial success, as well as the general format of guilds, quests, raid encounters, etc. that we still follow today. Interestingly, what marked the difference between MMOs of the late 90s and MMOs after was how you progressed your character. See, in Ultima, EverQuest, Lineage, and Asheron's Call, you leveled primarily by killing monsters. These were sandbox MMOs in the purest sense. Yes, there were special quests and even bounty-like quests that required you to kill X amount of monsters, but what drove these games was the idea of exploring new lands and meeting new people. Then, with the release of games like Dark Age of Camelot, EverQuest 2, and of course World of Warcraft, we saw progression via story-based quest lines, along with what would come to be known as theme park MMOs, where you were more directly guided through a world rather than just dropped into it. Suddenly, we began to measure an MMORPG's quality not by its world, but by the stories it told. World of Warcraft released on November 23, 2004. Based on the hugely successful Warcraft IP, World of Warcraft was seen by some as Warcraft 4, as it continued the stories told in the 3 previous RTS games. World of Warcraft was a game changer. Unique graphics, immersive gameplay, rich lore, and the grounds for a true endgame raiding environment, World of Warcraft turned a pretty successful market into the single most lucrative business venture possible, and that meant dollar signs for publishers. Every game released after World of Warcraft copied it in some form. Rift, Guild Wars, Warhammer Online, and yes, even The Lord of the Rings Online. The incredible, some would say insurmountable, success of World of Warcraft made gaming publishers very receptive to new MMOs. As such, post-2005, we began to see MMORPGs release more often and market more aggressively to claim part of WoW's growing market share. Rift actually took shots at World of Warcraft directly in its online marketing.
Rated T for Teen.
So amidst all of the MMORPGs on the market, Lord of the Rings Online Shadows of Angmar finally released to the public on April 24, 2007. Why was it necessary for me to talk about what came before? Well, while the game that would eventually become known as The Lord of the Rings Online released in 2007, it was initially conceived as Middle-earth Online as early as 1998. Production began by the gaming company Sierra Online, well known for the King's Quest series, but was eventually sold to Vivendi, who gave the task of finishing Middle-earth Online to Turbine. Sources claim that the game was an absolute mess, and amidst production and legal challenges, Turbine eventually decided to abandon the 7-year project and start anew in 2004 as The Lord of the Rings Online. This means that Middle-earth Online was conceived as a sandbox MMO, focused more on enjoying the world of Middle-earth and not about the story of The Lord of the Rings, which Sierra in fact did not have full license to. So in 2004, with the success of World of Warcraft, Turbine instead decided to take the assets and knowledge of the Middle-earth Online and build a new MMO that followed the same format as World of Warcraft. That means that the world was constructed and the gameplay put on top of it were likely created with 2 different visions in mind. You can actually see what I mean in this trailer for Middle-earth Online. Note the release date of 2004, as well as how similar the game looks to today's finished product.
Mirabella Goldwater only snores when she's sleeping.
Arabella's my cousin.
Regardless, The Lord of the Rings Online stands as the perfect representation of Tolkien's legendarium. The lands, people, cultures, and story are so magnificently representative that I would recommend anyone who loves Tolkien to definitely check it out. But the question is, should you play it? Well, my answer is maybe? Lord of the Rings Online is now 12 years old, but its graphics, albeit outdated, are still absolutely beautiful and rival any existing MMO today. Its combat has steadily improved over the years, but it's never quite reached the smoothness of WoW's combat. Lack of macro support also means your toolbars are full of various spells and abilities that you may use sparingly or on cooldown. Additionally, the game has gone from a level 50 cap to a level 120 cap, which means the barrier of entry is so high for new players that it is unlikely to retain their interest long enough to catch up to the seasoned players they are likely to befriend. The catch-up mechanic, called Areas of the Valar, which is a real money boost of around $70 US, is also incredibly daunting as it does not give you any sort of training towards the class like World of Warcraft does. So you are left placing your 50 plus skills on your bars without having any idea what to do with them. One other barrier of entry is the current iteration of the legendary weapon system. Originally released in the Mines of Moria expansion, legendary weapons were intended to be weapons that leveled with you. However, as the level cap increased, rather than level up your existing weapon, you were instead forced to take on a new higher level weapon. This was eventually rectified, and starting at level 100, you acquire a weapon through barter, auction house, or crafting that is your final weapon in the game. The problem is, every new release increases the power of this weapon without any sort of catch-up. And both landscape and dungeon encounters are designed with the current level legendary power in mind. So anyone coming in later who hasn't put an immense amount of time or money is suddenly at a severe disadvantage. This is an immense hurdle for new players that Standing Stone Games desperately needs to address. Finally, most new players are people who are perhaps fan of the movies or maybe read the books in the past. As such, they would expect a game that featured iconic landscapes such as Gondor, Rohan, or Moria. In fact, when you create a character and choose where you're from, you would naturally assume that is where you would start your adventure. But we know that dwarves and elves start in the Blue Mountains, and humans and hobbits start in Bree, and Bjornings start in Grimbeorn's Lodge. Save for the Shire, Rivendell, and Bree, none of Eriador offers an iconic movie or book experience that makes an individual feel like they're playing The Lord of the Rings. Being a day one player myself, I can tell you the day of Mines of Moria opening up or the day we rode into Mordor was some of the most exciting times in my gaming life. But many new players will abandon the game before they can experience anything other than Eriador for the first 50 levels, which can sometimes take weeks. With all that being said, Lord of the Rings Online is a fantastic MMORPG. There has never been a more realized form of Middle-earth quite like it. Although it took a long time, almost all of Middle-earth is present in-game. The quests are beautifully written, and the endgame content is incredibly rewarding and challenging. But you cannot deny that Lord of the Rings Online has always catered towards its existing community, and has not focused on creating content that brings in new players. The recent release of Legacy servers is a step in the right direction, but it does not resolve the overall problems it faces. So, if you're a Tolkien fan and want to immerse yourself in the world of Middle-earth, yes, you should absolutely play this game. However, if you're looking for well-balanced, challenging combat, a fast leveling experience, and update quality on the level of Final Fantasy XIV or World of Warcraft, then this game isn't for you.